Hey, I'm Jeff.
I'm Allie.
This is the Weight Coaching Podcast. We're so glad you joined us. We're still doing what series?
Family business.
Family business.
Mm-hmm.
Business. We get down to some business here today, specifically in the family space. And
Yes.
so it's been a great month. We had your parents on. That was awesome. And I think we're going to have your sister on. She's awesome.
Yep.
But today we're going to talk about what it's like to work with our favorite,
Dun, dun, dun.
right? Our favorite team members, our favorite people.
Our
Each other.
spouse.
Yes, woohoo! So we're literally talking about today, we're excited to talk about what it's like to work with your spouse. And maybe some of you have been in a space where you're like, I would never want to work with my spouse. Or you're like, that's an interesting idea. As I was thinking about this, I thought about my dad. My dad was a bricklayer. He laid block in brick in his car very early in the morning. He would drive away to some unknown workspace that none of us knew where he was working. He would work all day, come home extremely tired, dusty, sweaty, shower up, we'd eat dinner together. My mom and my dad never worked together. And then I thought about your mom and dad.
They worked together for years and years.
Seriously?
Both in the church and in the business.
So two different spaces.
Yeah.
And even today, even after they've sold the business to Gel, the church, they handed that off. They're still working together as they work with us and discover strength.
Yes.
And so it's kind of crazy. So we want to talk about it today and just give you a few things that have helped us a lot just as we've walked through this process. And so what do you want to talk about first?
Well, so I think it's actually interesting because, yes, my parents worked together. I had that example. I worked with my first husband, Tyler, at the family business. And then when we got married, I wanted to work with you, but you were very nervous about that.
I was a bit hesitant.
Yeah.
Because I worked with my previous wife, Tiffany, as well. And as I thought about it, I think when you're younger and you're immature and you don't know who you are, and I think insecure as well, it's hard to truly work with someone who knows your flaws in and out. Right? And so, if you're insecure in one space, it's hard not to be insecure in the other space. And I think I was pretty immature, and so was Tiffany when we first started working together. And I think before we ever got a chance to really create healthy processes, it felt very personal.
Yeah.
And there was some challenges trying to get past that. So that was honestly, because when we started talking about it, you were far more open to the idea. I think that you had a really healthy example in your parents.
Yep.
And I don't know that I'd ever had a really healthy example.
And so maybe this is helpful for some of you. Maybe, you're considering or you really want to work together or you do work together, but it's challenging and it's difficult. And so hopefully we'll just give you some really good tips on how to work through that and how to make it a more successful working relationship. Because I do think working with your spouse can be incredibly challenging, but it's like an amazing relationship that you can have. Think about how well you do know each other. And if, you really have a good mixture of strengths and skill between the two of you, that can be such an incredible dynamic partnership.
Absolutely.
Within a business. But of course, it can also be explosive. What are some ways that we can, mitigate the butting heads and the tension and those explosive moments so that it can be a really dynamic partnership? So one of the things that you often say is without process, things feel personal. So let's start there. First of all, what does that mean?
So I think that so without a process, things feel personal. And what I think about with that is that, so we have a weekly, what we call a level 10 meeting. It's our 90 minutes together where we have an agenda and we talk through our calendars together. Because honestly, so much miscommunication between a couple happens surrounding a calendar. And it's like, well, I thought you had the kid. I thought you had the kid. I thought you had this. Oh, you didn't know about that? And all of a sudden, because of the lack of communication around the calendar, the logistical, who covers what or where we're going or what we're doing, it just creates really an undue opportunity
Yeah.
for frustration with your spouse. Like, well, I wish you would have told me that. I wish you would have told me you're going out with the girls, or you're going out with the guy, or we had that with, I didn't know that. Why didn't you? So then in the midst of that, now not only am I trying to figure out how to tell the guys I can't go out with them, or, I have to go to this event rather than that event. Like, I'm frustrated about it, but then I'm also emotional about it. And you're the problem because we didn't have a clear process. And all of a sudden it becomes personal. Like, it has to do with football, but I'm pissed at my wife right now because there's no clear process. And then we have this like emotional angst that we have to get over because we didn't simply have like a calendar meeting.
So process can really help prevent a lot of like bumping into each other and mistakes and drop balls and all the things. I think another way that I think about process helping to not make things feel personal is same thing. Like in this meeting, we spend about 60 minutes just talking through issues. And we both know that's coming, right? That's a part of the agenda every single week. And so I go into that meeting knowing we're going to talk about issues. And you may bring up an issue with, something that has to do with me, whatever. And the thing is, though, is like we're bringing up an issue at a time we've said this is when we're going to talk about issues. We're not bringing it up like when we're brushing our teeth or, catching you just off guard at a time where you react poorly because you simply just weren't even prepared to talk about this thing in this moment. And so I think that's another way where it really reduces like, people just reacting curtly because they weren't ready to address that thing.
Well, I think honestly, even as you're saying this, I'm thinking about like you add kids to the mix and all of a sudden you have kids that bombard you with 1,000 questions a day and you're almost kind of like on guard from that a little bit or getting sucker punched. Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? Oh my gosh, I just walked in the door. And then if your spouse is like, oh, hey, here's 5 more things to throw at you quick. And you're like, I've just spent like 8 to 10 hours making decisions and mentally I am just fried. And I don't even know if I can tell, our 10-year-olds that they can go to the park right now. And I just don't even want to make that decision. And then you're like, hey, guess what? My mom invited us over to this for this, or I got invited to this for that. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so really having a time and space set aside weekly where we know, hey, we're going to talk about what it's like, does Bo go to that birthday party? Do we go to this event? Well, what about, okay, who's going to watch the kids if we do this? Like, we have that time and space set aside where really, literally, that is specifically meant for that. So it doesn't hijack everything else. It doesn't hijack, like, us walking in the door, having a moment with our kids where we're like, hey, love you guys. How was school today? How was it? Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go with your friend. And not to make it sound like angelic because we have it, but the amount of stress and emotional angst that is removed because we know we have a time and space that we're going to process that issue is gold. Like, it is so gold. And we know if we are just disciplined to have that meeting, we know that the results that come out of it, it's going to be so helpful and it's going to help us personally because we have a process in place.
Yeah. So process helps make things not feel personal, right?
100%.
We actually do have a course on running effective meetings that has a full meeting agenda. So if you're like, okay, we really need that, we need what you guys are talking about, you can get lots more information and the full meeting agenda in that course. But that's just one of the main tools that really helps us in instilling process.
And I'll be honest, I just have to say this because sometimes if you're like, I've talked with friends before and I talk about the level 10 meeting that I have with Allie and they're like, they look at me like I'm weird. They're like, you have a meeting with your wife? Like, you literally have like a staff meeting type thing? And I'm like, yeah, we do. We have a meeting where we talk about calendars, we talk about issues, we talk about headlines, we talk about like, hey, personal and professional win from the past week. Like, most often we know each other's, but in the case that we've had a really busy week, we're kind of going separate directions. It's a time to come back together and to celebrate one another. And also, like, I think about if there's 90 minutes set aside and you invest that in each other, in helping each other and moving forward together, Like, I would rather spend 90 minutes working together, collaborating together, than trying to catch each other for 2 minutes here or a minute here or a minute here all week long, living in frustration. And specifically you living in frustration towards me because you're more detail oriented and I'm more
Absolutely.
like, I'm more head in the clouds, like, oh, I don't know, whatever. Like, if that's a way that we can work together better, I don't care what my buddies look at me like. I don't like, what is your relationship with your wife like? Oh, you guys don't have meetings about calendars? Oh, have you ever had a miscommunication about that? Oh, interesting. Maybe you should do this meeting. It's not us versus, that's not it. Like, this works for us. If not having meetings with your spouse and miscommunicating with your spouse and having a ton of emotional angst with your spouse, if that works for you, keep doing it, okay? It sounds like you got something figured out there. But if you do ever want to remove a little bit of chaos, change a little bit, and grow together, I encourage you. Jump in the class, take the class. It truly is a lifesaver. So when you have process in place, things don't feel personal. So we could literally talk about that for hours.
But we won't.
We're
going to move on.
Yes,
So
next. The next one.
The thing that you're probably waiting for.
Yeah.
Clear boundaries.
Ooh, clear boundaries. Yes. Like, this is like, if you have clear boundaries at the beginning, you don't have to like say things in a moment of frustration like, stay in your lane. So I'm just being clear. So boundaries help alleviate those things. Not that we've ever said that to each other.
The biggest thing with boundaries when we're talking about having clear boundaries, though, is making sure that your working relationship isn't taking over your entire relationship.
Yes.
So that's one of the biggest issues in couples working together is now they eventually kind of feel like business partners or associates rather than like husband and wife, and having still like that living, thriving like romance, right? Between the two of you. Like suddenly we're business partners with work. We are with the kids too. Like everything just feels like we're just talking about issues and logistics rather than playing and having fun together and spending good time. So boundaries are so key in really keeping the marriage alive, that marriage relationship alive. And so one of the rules that we have is like when we come home, we're not talking about work. We're not getting into issues.
We try very hard not to. Like to say we don't.
Oh, that would be a lie.
But to say we try not to, because it really is, it's very challenging. And if we didn't have some form of boundary, we would just go for it.
All night.
Yeah.
We would go all night because that's what's on our minds. So one of the things that has helped us to kind of adhere to that, and again, we don't do it perfectly, is having some buffer time. So we work together throughout the day, but it's not like we're just talking all day long, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. The kids are like, why do you guys need to talk to each other more? Haven't we been together all day? Kind of.
Like we're in the same space, kind of doing
Right.
similar things, but at the same time, we're not necessarily sitting talking with each other.
And so we have this tendency to want to debrief and share like what happened, give updates, all the things. And so carving out space to do that is really helpful, and then being able to like cut it off and like, okay, we're going to do this, and then we're done for the night. And so however you want that to look, whether it's an hour and going for a walk or just sitting down and talking, like in hopefully some private space that you have in your home with kids not interrupting you every 2 minutes.
Right.
Establishing the amount of time that you're going to spend together, having that buffer time, and just saying like, okay, let's debrief, like how'd the day go? What are some things we need to talk about? But then having like that end time to it too. That's been really helpful for us in not letting it bleed into the entire night.
And it's a great like okay, shut it off, moving into the next thing. Because it's like, we work together, there's the boardroom and the bedroom, and you don't want it all to bleed together, because it's like, it really is like we're just business partners. Because I really truly feel like the tyranny of the urgent, right? You're like, oh, well, did you do this or this or this or this or this for the business? And you forget about the most amazing, unique human being in your life. And now they're like, you're delegating stuff to them rather than enjoying life with them. And so without having a form of a healthy boundary, and we talk about this, even like a soft boundary, You know, like sometimes it's harder, other times it's softer. Like the other night we were talking and we hadn't seen each other for a couple of days. I was out of town and you're like, well, how you feeling? I'm like, I feel a little like whatever, but I'm good. And you're, to your point, you're like
such a fake good.
such
right?
a fake good. It was, because honestly, if the boundary is too firm, what happens is that I'm just going to try to smile, fake it till I make it. I'm going to be inauthentic. And if your intimacy with your spouse is strong enough, they're going to know that. They're like, okay, seriously, what's the issue? And if you don't carve out time to talk about that, like Allie was like, hey, can you not be fine for just 10 minutes? And can we deal with it so that we can actually have a night together? And I was like, yeah, that seems fair. And so, but even putting a time frame on it, like we're not going to talk about for hours, and let's just talk about it for a short amount of time, so we can get on with the night. And
It's
we
like
did
a
that.
release valve, right? Like
100%.
you got to let out some of the steam. You got to release some of that tension. And so that's one thing, like, especially, you know, we have date night and once a week, and that's part of having boundaries around work and protecting the relationship. And so there's, again, this rule of like, we're not going to talk about work all night during date night, but sometimes we need to talk about something. And it's not because we're solving an issue, a work issue, but it's like, I feel down, or I feel like legitimately like demoralized, or whatever it is.
Or even
And
super
it's
excited, like something great happened. I have
Right.
to share this win with you.
Yes. And so there's something going on with our heart. And we talked about that. Like, okay, if a couple didn't work together and they were out for a date night, they probably would talk about this thing,
Absolutely.
right? And so it's interesting to kind of separate out, like, even if it's work related, are we talking about work? Or am I caring for my husband who feels a certain way, like wants to celebrate something or needs to process something? It's really important to kind of have that sensitivity and be able to actually separate those things. And it's okay if it's like, no, let's talk about it because this is about your heart, not solving a business issue.
I think about that even from like a biblical standpoint, like Adam and Eve, all the way back in the garden. Like you have like Adam was created first, Eve was removed from his side, his rib, and the idea like that she was given this name as Ezer, meaning like a helpmate suitable for. And the idea of that helpmate suitable for, like sometimes you think, oh, weaker, less than, and that's not it at all. Like biblically speaking, the word Ezer is used multiple times in scripture, and it refers to Eve and it refers to God. So there's obviously infinite strength there. And if Allie is in her proper space and I'm using her like in helping, allowing her to be in that space and like, hey, speak to my heart, there's no one else on this earth that is as uniquely suited and fitted to perfectly speak to my heart as Allie. And if I'm too busy faking it till I make it, or trying to be like, no, we're not going to talk about that today because it's date night, like I'm doing both of us a disservice. I am isolated in frustration from my day, and Allie's like, you know what? I could speak into that if you'd allow me to.
Yep.
And so really what it is being like, okay, we're in our right places. Like Allie's there to speak into my heart and really like, and that was one of the things.
Supporting you as a wife.
Yes.
Not a business partner.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think that's a huge distinction that really needs to be made and really needs to be honored. So I think that's one of the things that I do love about like working together is when you do understand the distinction between here's personal and professional. And professionally, I might feel very isolated at times because of something that happened, but then there's times where like Allie speaks specifically into my heart and I need that. I think that's a huge part of the idea of having those healthy boundaries. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today in our Family Business Focus Month. Super excited for you that you joined us. And I encourage you, if this helped you, subscribe, comment, and share. That way, if it helped you, hopefully it can help other people as well.
We will be continuing this conversation about working with your spouse. So make sure to look for
Part
conversation
two.
number
Part
2.
two. Thank you.